This is Never Down, Never Out with T.R. Matson. This podcast is about discipline when motivation fades, resilience when things get hard, and showing up when quitting would be easier. No hype, no shortcuts, just the mindset required to build something real. One day at a time. Let's get into it. Welcome back. Episode 45. Again, going to start out. I know I'm annoying everybody with this, but thank you all for the support. Thank you for everything. I'm hopping on here real quick to knock this one out. I think this is a good topic, and I want to get it done. Hopefully it doesn't come across like I'm rushing these or anything. I do put a lot of thought into them. I've spent a lot of time with the list, but I find that my recordings do the best when, the passion hits me on a topic. So that's where we're at. But again, thank you all for the support. Thank you so very much. Let me know how I'm doing. Let me know if there's things you like, things you don't like. I keep watching the watch hours on YouTube. We're getting close to hitting the first milestone of 3,000 watch hours. So I'm excited about that. And then we'll see what happens. So episode 45, how to stay consistent under pressure. I don't know a whole lot about pressure, except for the fact that I guess the beginning of my career was based all around pressure, right? Just kidding. Just being sarcastic, feeling a little sarcastic. So bear with me. Consistency under pressure. I once heard that a person, when put under pressure, does one of two things. When you squeeze them and put them under pressure, they either focus or they burst. And I kind of thought about that, and I was like, that's really, it's true. I mean, I've seen that in my life. Carrier aviation at its core is pressure. I mean, the idea of landing an airplane on a boat is a pretty ridiculous idea. Add to it nighttime, add to it malfunctions, rough sea state. It's ridiculous amounts of pressure. But again, the people that were successful in it, I think were successful because when they were squeezed, they focused. They didn't burst. And I think that's important. So, and I've noticed this even later on. So just recently at the airline, I was landing in Florida after one of the frontal passages, really bad winds. I've talked about it. And we had to go around. And a go around at the airlines is something we train for constantly. Every time I go in the sim, we train multiple go arounds. It's really not a super dynamic maneuver as far as, there's other things, engine failure, stuff like that, far more dynamic than just going around. But a surprise go around when you weren't really expecting it. And I say that is there's times in the airlines where you're expecting to go around. The plane ahead of you is too close and you're just flying the approach, and maybe they get off on an early taxiway and you make it, but the likelihood is you kind of know. But when it comes to gusty winds and things like that, sometimes it's just not your lucky day and you hit a gust, and that's what happened to me this particular night in Florida. And we went around. I called to go around. We went. I was hand flying the airplane at the time. And it was interesting because the pressure was immediate. It was nighttime. We were still getting beat up from the winds. It was still very, very gusty. And I executed the mechanics of it. But then, the pressure is on now, right? You still have to fly the airplane. There's 200 people behind you that are relying on you. And I became hyper-focused in the moment. It kind of surprised me, actually, but like hyper-focused on the flight directors, on my airspeed, altitude, configuration of the airplane, way more focused than normal. And it just happened. And I thought to myself afterwards, I was in the hotel and I was like, man, that was a wild experience that I noticed it. That the focus was there. It was weird, right? And I think what it is it's the training, it's the repetition, right? I had trained go-arounds both as an instructor and as a pilot for over a decade at the airlines. And I think it's that repetitive training that your body and mind go back to. One of the things we used to call, and I had an old girlfriend get so mad at me when I use this, but the Navy, we call it brainstem power. You get to this point where you're just on brainstem power. And she was actually a brain scientist. So whenever she would hear myself or my friends talk about being on brainstem power, she would get angry and explain to us what part of the brain it actually is, which I'm not about to explain to you. You could Google it. There's a reason she's an ex-girlfriend. Just kidding. But the bottom line is it didn't, with her, she didn't understand what we were saying. And what we were saying is, we had trained in the Navy for everything. I mean, if you think about it, the vast majority of the flight hours I got in the Navy was training. Everybody is. I mean, it just is. I mean, now that's not to say we didn't do combat. That's not to say we didn't do deployments. But even on deployments, we were training. And there was a very deliberate training cycle that we would go through in the Navy from when we would start our workups to when we were ready to deploy. And throughout that cycle, they were constantly increasing the pressure, almost to the point where you didn't even notice. But they were just increasing the pressure ever so slightly. And I think this is military training across the board. I don't think it's necessarily aviation dependent. And so we would sit there and they would increase this pressure. But then when it really happened, when you're, in the Indian Ocean and the seas are horrible, or you're off the coast of Australia and the deck is pitching 40 plus or minus feet, or you have an engine failure, or you have to get back aboard because you're blue water ops and you don't have a divert and you're in an E2 and you can't take gas because you don't have in-flight refueling, or whatever the circumstances are that you find yourself in, that training, that is your consistency. That is your, that's, how do I put it? That is your fallback. And they often say, and people argue this, you fall back on your training. To some degree, I think you do. I think in the moment when things are going wrong and when the pressure has increased, your body and your brain go, okay, we've prepared for this. We know what we need to do, and let's get it done. Let's get the work done and move forward with it. And I found that time and time again in the Navy, and I'm now seeing it real time in the airlines. So how do I apply that to regular life? Well, if there's something that I'm working on that I know there's going to be pressure in the future, whether that's a deadline, whether that's a workload amount that I need to get done in a certain amount of time, whether it's a particularly difficult day parenting that I see. My wife and I share a calendar like a lot of couples I'm sure do. And you could look ahead a few days and be like, whew, Thursday is going to be rough. Like, we got a lot to do on Thursday, right? It's the repetition and the planning and the preparation that get us to be ready to go for the moment. So I don't know what you're working on today. I don't know the goal that you have in front of you. But inevitably you're gonna have pressure. Like, it's gonna come, whether it's a diet or exercise or a job, or the test at the end of a class, at the end of a semester, all of that. There's gonna be pressure. So how do you prepare? You have to do the work. You have to stay in the moment and do the reps beforehand, right? If you look at it from like a weightlifting standpoint, a power lifter doesn't go out there and lift the heaviest weight on the competition day. They know they could lift that weight come competition time, right? Because they've done the reps. They've put in the work, and that's ultimately what it is. Because then when the time comes and you're nervous, right? I mean, I've talked about it before. I'll talk about it again. You know, coming down from holding to land on an aircraft carrier, your heart rate is through the roof. Like it's scary at night. Like anybody who tells you nighttime's not scary is lying to you. I'm sorry, or they're a little nuts, because it is. I mean, it's hard. But if you've done the prep, then your brain can rely on that. Your brain can go to that place, you know, much to the dismay of my ex. You know, your brain can go on that brainstem power. If she ever hears this, I'm going to get a text. But your brain can fall back on that and go, okay, like we've been here before. And that's why training in the military to me is so awesome, because we train in the worst situations, in degraded environments. You know, I used to joke that I spent 13 years of my life flying planes built by the lowest bidder. And I think to some degree that's true, right? We take these planes, and, you know, the defense contracts that's the cheapest is usually the one that gets picked up. And then we put it into a harsh environment, and we beat the plane up, and we work it, and we work it, and we work it, and things break. And here we are in training that way. And I've told stories before about the malfunctions I've had and all these things. But then when those happened, I knew what to do. So whatever you're working on today, the only way you are going to be able to handle the moment when it comes is to prepare. That's how you stay consistent. My son has a presentation to give at school next week, and he needs to talk about a state. Okay. Well, now he's built this, you know, poster board, and he's got notes and all that. And he asked me, he goes, Dad, what do I do if I get nervous? And I go, you're not going to get nervous. He goes, well, I might get nervous. I go, you're not. I go, because you're going to rehearse it in front of your mom and I enough times to where it's no different. You're just going to stand up there, and it will be done properly because you know, because you've done it. You've practiced. So when we look at what we're working on, and we look at the fact that there are going to be these milestones ahead that we have to be prepared for, the only way to be prepared is to do the reps, to put in the time, put in the work. I've said it before, there's nothing pretty here. Do the reps, and then when the time comes, and that moment comes, and you're nervous in front of that boardroom, or you're nervous for that test, you'll be ready because you know you prepared. Worst feeling in the world is showing up to a test not prepared. That stinks. So if you know these milestones are coming, then let's prepare. Let's map out a plan and prepare what we need to do so that when they do come, we're ready for it. I had somebody message me once, and he goes, how many hours did you study for your private pilot's license? And I laughed. I said, I don't remember, because I did an equivalency exam. And he said, he goes, well, how many do you think I should study? And I said, 10 more hours than you need to pass the test. Because then you won't be nervous when you're taking the test. So when you look forward and you look at the things you're doing today and looking at the goals you have, think about that. Map that out. That doesn't happen by accident. You have to have a plan. And as long as you have a plan, when the pressure rises, you'll be fine. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time. If this episode helped you, don't just listen, apply it. Progress is built in what you do after the message ends. Remember, never down, never out. I'll see you tomorrow.